One, two, three.
All right, here we are. Top 10 of 2022. This was a very good year for movies, although my theory is that every year is a good year for movies. So maybe it's not that different in the grand scheme of things, but I think among the few years I've done deep dives on, this may be the best by a little bit. I think shorts this year were quite strong. And even though on this list I'm just going to do feature films, I do want to briefly shout out the 4 shorts that I do have on my top 10 list, which are Haul Out, Pachyderm, Sierra, and Ice Merchants. Love all those. Would certainly recommend them if you're looking to watch short films at all. Just to note, I am counting 2022 movies as anything on Letterboxd with a 2022 release date, which means it had its premiere in 2022, not necessarily a wide release. 2 movies specifically we'll get to. I will mention them as movies that you might associate with 2023, but I have on here. Let's get to it. Number 10, Fire of Love. This is a documentary memorializing a pair of volcanologists, the Crafts, and showing off some of their work, some of the footage and experiences they documented. Something interesting to note that even though this movie got a lot more attention than the other one, there is a sort of twin documentary made by Werner Herzog called The Fire Within, Requiem for Katya and Maurice Kraft. Have not watched that one, but it's just interesting that, there's the occasional coincidence throughout movie history of 2 movies about basically the same thing. Probably check out both. The other one is by, of course, Werner Herzog, so there's almost certainly merit to it. But this one specifically has a ton of beautiful footage of volcanoes and their experiences and their interactions, their relationship. The main draw really is just the engaging nature of their life stories and their passions. Right, like I think people are generally drawn to people who have visible and tangible passion about something. And this movie just puts it on full display. It shows their life's work and the beauty of it, the things they helped study. It's also interesting, I think, because of the narrator. It's not what I might call like a typical narrator voice. There is it's a female narrator, which is already, I think, somewhat uncommon. But also she has a very emotional sort of quality to her voice. And it kind of fits given that it's a passionate, emotive telling of their life together. So it's an interesting touch, even though I'm not exactly sure if I'm on board with it. It is another sort of uniqueness to the film. But it's only 93 minutes, and it is well worth checking out in my mind. Next, Nope. This film concerns the inhabitants of a ranch in California who discover something concerning. This is Jordan Peele, his 3rd film. It is my favorite of his. I do like his other 2 as well, to various degrees. But this one just has such strong high points for me. Anytime this movie tries to do a crescendo, it hits hard. I think especially something like The House, as one of my favorite horror scenes from the decade. It additionally has some interesting technical elements with the way it's shot day for night. And while it's still kind of noticeable, it has a certain aesthetically pleasing quality to me, I think. Like that rich blue while still having some definition. You can still see shadows that don't look right and some things like that, but it's minimal. The nighttime scenes really do look aesthetically pleasing to me, at least. It's got some nice thematic work. It draws in its different plot details from kind of surprising sources in a convincing way. Some really nice performances, a very understated one, really, from Daniel Kaluuya. There's a great dynamic between him and his on-screen sibling, was it Keke Palmer? It manages to mix in some humor pretty well. That is certainly something Jordan Peele loves to do. And it rarely, if ever, overwhelms the creature feature type stuff the film has going on. So I think for me, between his 3 movies, this is the best blend of horror and comedy, although I still think it falters a little bit at points. That's one of my gripes with the movie. I think there are a couple points where it needs to pull back some of the humor a bit. But obviously, like, it's on this list, so it's not a huge complaint by any means. Number 8, The Quiet Girl. A quiet, neglected girl is sent away from her dysfunctional family to live with relatives for the summer. This is, unlike many movies on this list, neither shocking nor surprising. It is straightforward, it is emotional, it's beautiful, wholesome. It's also Irish. The young girl is extremely likable as you kind of watch her adapt to her new environment, the way she comes out of her shell, the way she comes to appreciate her, parents for the summer. The score matches the tone well, providing some gentleness and some loving atmosphere. This is really just a movie about the journey, not just of the girl, but also of the family members watching her and the way they all progress and come together and enjoy their time together as we learn more about them and the reasons they are the way they are. You could pretty much see where it's going. It's not shocking, but not every movie needs to be unpredictable. There are certain types of movies that benefit, I think, from seeing the end coming long before it's there. Because in some cases, that can really just make you want to look away from something you know is about to happen. And I think this is a movie that does not need to be unpredictable. The fact that it is straightforward is to its benefit. Number 7, Barbarian. A woman stays the night at a double booked Airbnb and finds plenty to be afraid of in the house. I didn't really know anything about the movie before sitting down to watch it in the theater. And I happened to look it up while, ignoring trailers and found out that it was directed by Zach Kreger, who was a former member of Whitest Kids You Know. And I certainly didn't expect to ever see that guy directing a feature film, but here we are. He's got talent for it, apparently. This is, in a way, not my normal type of film. I do not like horror mixed with comedy. And again, here we are. I love it despite that. I think one of the reasons the horror mixes with the comedy well is that it has a unique edge, like a sort of bizarre quality to it, both the humor and the horror. So in a way, they feel more united than the way I normally think of comedy and horror going together. It's chaotic in some of its specific content, but I think it's got an extremely neat and clearly defined thematic structure that I think is really satisfying. And also, each sort of sub act of the movie provides a unique feeling and a unique aesthetic in some cases that really break things up so nicely. It is a movie I want to be careful not to say too much about because each act really is important and deserves to have its own spotlight and deserves to have some blindness going into it. Like I said, I mean, the humor is enjoyable and the experience, part of the experience is that bizarre quality and the things you just can't quite see coming. So, this has a lot of attention given to it already. A lot of people have seen it, but if you haven't, would absolutely recommend checking it out. Number 6, Talk to Me. This is one of the 2 movies I was referring to about movies with wide releases in 2023, but being listed here in 2022. When a group of friends discover how to conjure spirits using an embalmed hand, they become hooked on the new thrill, until one of them goes too far and unleashes terrifying supernatural forces. In one small specific way, to me, this is similar to Barbarian in the terms of having some of a kind of bizarre edge to it. Not quite as heavy on humor as Barbarian, but it's certainly present, and certainly it combines with the bizarre quality in a couple of cases. Sophie Wilde, the main actress, is fantastic. She shows a lot of range, not just within her character and a wide range of emotions, but also as the character that she plays when she is under the effects of the embalmed hand. This is a movie that nails its most intense moments. It's a directorial debut, although the directors do have plenty of experience working on YouTube. But when it needs to be punchy, it does. It's got a great feel for emphasis. It's got some awesome makeup in several scenes. Part of that is the embalming hand scenes. That's a main feature, but throughout the movie, there are a number of different makeup jobs that I think are great. I like the way the metaphor is delivered through the main story device, one of loneliness, isolation, and desire for belonging. I love the opening scene. It's a recognizable style, and it is perfect for setting up all the ideas. It's immersive with the long take, really never really lets you leave the atmosphere, which, even though it happens at a party, it certainly feels extremely harsh and unwelcoming, as it should in context. And yeah, I mean, I've watched a lot of horror movies at this point, and this one still got to me pretty well, so I would recommend Talk to Me a lot. Next, How to Blow Up a Pipeline. This is the other wide release 2023 movie that is listed as 2022. A crew of young environmental activists execute a daring mission to sabotage an oil pipeline. This is a heist movie, and we get heist buildup, execution, background of characters involved in the heist. It's a recognizable formula. It's executed so precisely, and it is an interesting premise for a heist movie, certainly. It's told non-linearly, and a lot of the weight of the movie is going to depend on how well you receive the jumps and when and where, the movie chooses to switch locations and times. I think it's interesting how thin the line can be between killing your momentum by switching times, locations, whatever, and keeping the audience hooked with like a cliffhanger. And a lot of that is going to depend on what you switch to and whether that is able to hold up the tension that came before it. In this movie's case, like the whole time it's pretty fast paced and it has places to be, things to do, stuff to talk about. So to me, when we jump around a lot, I don't think the movie ever really sags that much. There is a character or two maybe that are less compelling and less impactful than others. So for me, the movie's main flaws are those moments where the investment falters a bit. But in general, the movie's style is really wonderful and it balances its tension in different areas and different times quite well. And the actual heist itself is compelling and it's taut and, there's danger and uncertainty. So I think the movie succeeds extremely well as a heist movie and it uses the nonlinear storytelling to full effect. So absolutely check this one out. Next, the Banshees of Inisherin. Two lifelong friends find themselves at an impasse when one abruptly ends their relationship. Martin McDonagh is building up a nice filmography between this and especially In Bruges. I love In Bruges. Three Billboards, of course, got a lot of Academy Awards attention. I like that movie as well. It is, I think, impressive that he's put together such a quote-unquote serious comedy, you could say. Serious not just because of the, kind of grave and kind of disturbing circumstances surrounding the friendship, but also the deadpan humor goes to serve that. It certainly never feels overtly comedic. Maybe never is too strong, but the prevailing emotion is not one of, frivolity. It's dark, and it never shies away from that. And despite that, it manages to coax out like a good amount of laughs. And I think pairing those two together is extremely impressive. It's an actor's movie. All four of the main performances, I would say, are very strong. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of Barry Keoghan, I think this is his best role. Certainly, it's still sad that Carrie Condon didn't win an Oscar, but what are you going to do? It's a great looking movie set in this rural landscape. It's got some wonderful score and points. Even though I'm not 100% on board with the humor, I think there are moments that it doesn't work well. Those moments are very sparse. And largely, you just get sucked into the performances and the way things escalate and the ugliness combined with the sort of absurd conditions that relationship creates. A lot of people have seen this one too. I realize I actually have a lot of very popular movies on here. I can't really offer any hidden gems, but I don't know. These are the best movies I saw for the year. So, number 3, Tar. This film, set in the international world of classical music, centers on Lydia Tarr, widely considered one of the greatest living composer-conductors and the first ever chief female conductor of a major German orchestra. Todd Field, another great director, perhaps flies a little bit under the radar, but he's gotten Academy Awards attention for each of his 3 features. This movie was a grower for me. I thought it was just good on a first watch, but I just think more and more of it every time I watch it. Cate Blanchett is a clear highlight. Again, was very disappointed she did not win an Academy Award for her performance, but so be it. The lead performance is the most clear and obvious strength, but I think a lot of strength also lies in the quietly excellent cinematography and editing. I think the movie has a great feel for what it needs to show at any given moment, and when it needs to let things play out, give things, people, conversation, space. I love a movie that's able to give space to things, especially in a movie like this where the performance is so important. Being able to give room for the character to do things, for us to see the character do things that are not just line delivery, really helps give life to the character. Those non-speaking moments, those casual moments where a person is just existing briefly, I think are an important part of a character. And this is something that the film just lives in and excels at. This is a non-spoiler video, so I'm not going to go into plot details too much, but the we'll say the specific direction and progression the film has, and especially the way the characters' actions turn out in Act 3, I think. It's just fascinating. Number 2, Resurrection. A woman's carefully constructed life is upended when an unwelcome shadow from her past returns. This may be the only underseen gem on this list. It is certainly the least viewed of all these movies and the least well received, though it's not poorly received. And certainly plenty of people have seen it. This is another, maybe one of the best performances I've ever seen. I love Rebecca Hall. I love her in this movie and The Night House specifically. I think both those performances are brilliant. Here, it's especially important because we need to establish this character's competency and sort of control and grip over things basically instantly. Because a large, very large percentage of this movie is concerned with her fall from that and the way she spirals. This is another movie that has multiple great performances, with Angela Wong Carbone and Tim Roth both providing great support and a villain, respectively. The main draw is the contrast, like I said, between her initial state and the way the avenue she takes, the events that happen that kind of cause her to crumble. And that initial state is so important because we need to have that contrast between what she used to be and what she becomes. You have to buy the initial state quickly. It's literally minutes that you have to get on board. And I think Rebecca Hall is exactly the person to do that. It's such a good character study. It has such good decisions, the way things progress. It knows what its strength is, really. And the movie just lets Rebecca Hall just go for it. And Tim Roth, they play off each other so well. Man, I just love this movie. You just have to watch it. I can't fully explain. I can't explain enough about it without spoiling anything. So you just have to take my word for it and check it out if you can. And then number 1, of course, kind of a normie pick, but I absolutely love Aftersun. Sophie reflects on the shared joy and private melancholy of a holiday she took with her father 20 years earlier. It's kind of wild how good directorial debuts can get and have gotten. There really is fantastic direction here. It's self-assured and confident. It's got great shot composition that helps with visual storytelling, great editing that really knows what it needs to focus on, and all of this stuff is part of a subtle layer of storytelling that I think you just don't see in a lot of movies. It really is telling 2 stories at once, and the second layer is almost all visual. Some things about the film become clearer on a rewatch, but everything is there on the surface, and the film tells you that there's more on the surface. Everything focused on with Callum is shown, even if it's not explicitly stated, and that's perfect for what it's trying to portray, because that basically is Sophie's experience, that she has one experience 20 years earlier, and she has a separate experience now watching it back. Music is wonderfully chosen throughout. Obviously, if you've seen it, you know the main musical draw to the film, but I think there's a lot of good soundtrack throughout. Even though the movie is mostly sort of about Callum, it is still fun to just watch Sophie adolesce and learn about the world and try to navigate her relationship with her parents. The emotions are beautifully constructed, as is the story, and it's just an absolute treat to watch this movie. I've only cried at a few movies, and this is absolutely one of them. I cried in the theater watching it the first time. It's beautiful. It's wonderfully made, and I'm so looking forward to whatever is the next movie that Charlotte Wells makes. So that's the 10. I'm basically just going to try to do a top 10 for every year I can, because it's just a lot of fun to recap everything from a year. And next week, I'll try to do the last film movements video. So hopefully looking forward to that, and I'll see you in that video.